Good evening and welcome everyone to Basic Rights Oregon's Queer Town Hall. Tonight we'll be talking about immigrant rights and the effect that COVID-19 has had on our communities. I'm Nancy Hawk, I'm the Executive Director of Basic Rights Oregon, and tonight's going to be a really important discussion. As you know, immigration is a national issue, but it has very local effects. And as we all know, we have a president who has absolutely no respect for immigrants. And so I've been thinking a lot about immigrant rights and immigration and what's happening with our communities, whether it's the recent ban on immigration that's been enacted or unjust ICE detention centers. It's all an important part of the equation, and we'll definitely be talking about those things tonight. There's additional impacts, right, of what's happening right now. Folks have had to continue to work, and they're considered essential workers, but they aren't given access to proper protection. Others have been laid off, but public services like unemployment insurance are unavailable due to immigration status. And many clinics have closed, and access to health care is very limited. And so it just feels like there's such an issue, right? People are considered essential workers, but not essential enough to get a stimulus check. And it's unfair. And so we're trying to fight back. So Basic Rights Oregon, along with CAUSA and PAYCUN and Unite Oregon, and a number of community organizations supported the creation of the Oregon Worker Relief Fund, which recently received $10 million from the state so that immigrant communities can be supported during this crisis. And it's a great start, and it's not nearly enough to cover the needs of people who are being directly impacted by what's happening right now. So I am really glad to be joined by an incredible group of panelists representing a diverse group of voices who can discuss the current state of immigrant rights here in Oregon and Washington, and a little bit about what's happening nationally. And tonight's about how we in immigrant communities can support ourselves, and then also for folks who aren't part of immigrant communities, how you can support your friends and neighbors during this pandemic and beyond. So you can ask folks questions directly, and the way you ask questions is as YouTube comments. And everyone who donates tonight or asks a question will be entered into a raffle to win one of our great Protect Trans Kids tote bags. Can't find mine right now because despite the pandemic, my house is still a mess, but you know, it's a great tote bag. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started with our incredible panel. And what I'm gonna ask you all is your name, your pronouns, your organization, and my standard check-in question, which is one good or positive thing that you've learned from being home so much during this pandemic. And I'm gonna go ahead and start with Fatima, and we'll just go in alphabetical order.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Happy Tuesday. My name is Fatima. Fatima Mendoza. My pronouns are she, her, hers, or ella. And something that I've learned from being at home is really how to take care of myself. I bought essential oils, like 3 different like flavored ones, like a lavender oil, and then a peppermint, and then like a mint. So it's been really good to just like learn how to really take care of myself. Like it's only gonna be me who's gonna be taking care of me. So like I have to do it. And then also with the help of my family. My mom, it was just a really good weekend, and I'm feeling really energized because I was feeling really low, and I'm finishing up school. And my dad, he got really sick. He's dealing with a heart problem. So just life just kind of hit me. It just went really fast, and now I'm just like trying to hold on. And so it's been a lot of like reading and like learning and reflection.
Oh, thank you. I hope your dad's getting better. Um, and I'll move on to our next guest to introduce themselves, Nuhamin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Nuhamin. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I am from Unite Oregon. And Fatima, my heart goes out to your dad recovering. I'm sorry to hear that. It's a really difficult time for a lot of us. And for me, looking at the good things has been a form of self-care, and really dwelling on the good things to help me stay focused on the work, because there's so much work right now and ahead. One of the things that I learned from staying home so much, I have a 7-year-old, and I haven't spent this much time around my kid since I had my kid. And, going back to work and really, and then the kids go to school and you don't really get to see your kids. So I'm just really enjoying the amount of time I get to have my child around me. And it's been a really great time to focus on that.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Umi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Hey, everyone. My name is Vera, she, her, ella pronouns, from the Familia Trans Queer Liberation Movement team, part of the organizing team, and it's great to be here with you all. I hear you all a lot on the self-care and ways to take care of ourselves. I think one of the ways for me has been learning patience and slowing down, and just kind of being forced to, has been a lot to learn through and process through for me. And it's been important in the midst of such a chaotic, even more chaotic time where there's a lot of loss and stuff. And so with you all and sending you all and loved ones the best.
Thank you. And we do have an additional guest who's going to join us tonight. She's running just a bit late, but that's okay. We're going to figure it out. And we were going to have someone from DC, but they weren't able to make the call. But you know what? We're going to figure it out, so we can still do our best to answer your questions. And if folks have really specific questions about immigration policy that we can't answer, we will find an answer. It might not be tonight, but it will be soon. So we still have access to all those experts. We just don't have them on the call tonight, but we do have really incredible folks. And so I already mentioned the worker relief package that passed, and Fatima, I know CAUSA worked really hard on that. Basic Rights Oregon, we lent our name, but we didn't do the hard work to make it happen. And I know you all did a lot of it. Can you tell us just a little bit about that Oregon Worker Relief Fund and how it's going to work and what it looks like?
Yeah, most definitely. It's been a long process, but currently, right now, we are in phase 1 of that application. So yay, it's super exciting news. There's 5 organizations who are in a part of this. So that's CAUSA, PECUN, Centro de Servicios, Latino Network, The Next Door, and Lower Columbia Hispanic Council. So these are, the organizations who are ready to go with the application. And it's really important because, like you said, there's been like this need, right? And it's been so impactful to see how our team was able to go to the legislator and recognize that there's 74,000 workers, families who are in so much need. And at first we didn't really pitch a number. Like we knew the amount of workers who existed, and we're like, okay, what can we do? What's going to be the plan? How are we going to strategize? And it was really a coalition, One Oregon and Oregon Ready, coming together and holding the committee at the legislature for COVID-19. It's like, please, listen to us. These are our families, right? And so it was a team effort for sure. Thanks to our executive director, Adriana, was really able to pull all the strings together and make that ask. And of course, with our policy director, Maribel, really coming in clutch and having to research all the things that Adriana didn't know about things, and making sure that we were writing something and something that was going to be well taken. And we were looking at leadership from Kate Brown and really Peter Courtney too. We were knocking on their doors and calling them up and sending emails. And our team, our comms team, also really had to do our digital toolkit on how to spread this, how to create a website, how to get the message out. And so that's really what we had to do. We had to highlight our stories again. And it was a really beautiful process, and just knowing who our essential workers are. And that's really what was key. being able to work together.
So I know it's a $10 million fund. Can you tell us a little bit more about who's eligible for those funds?
Yeah. So it's like I said, it is going to be an application process, and um, we recognize that there is a need, and there's already been people who have been reaching out to CAUSA and some of the other orgs, and we have our member list of folks who've already say, okay, we're needing help, but it's gonna obviously gonna take a few days to get those things processed. But yes, we're aware that there is the need, and there's that intake already.
Great, thanks. So let's talk a little bit about the work happening at Unite Oregon. Nuhameen, can you just tell us a little bit about what the COVID response has been?
Yeah, so similar to what CAUSA is doing, Unite Oregon has been getting calls from our community members, similar situations, folks being laid off from work, a lot of people not having health care and family members getting sick, not being able to afford rent, all of these things that a lot of people in the United States are experiencing. And currently, Unite Oregon has launched an immigrant refugee support fund. The goal is to raise $50,000. We've raised about 11,000 of that so far. And folks, if you want to find out and you want to donate, you can go to www.uniteoregon.org. We also compiled a resource list to have folks that are looking for food banks or any kind of COVID-related relief. We compiled a resource list, and we've been doing phone calls, checking in on our members and other community members to see how they are doing and what they're going through. So it's been very similar to what other organizations are going through, and we're trying to meet that need through fundraising and resource allocation. We're also integrating self-care, mental health, really like naming the feelings we're feeling right now, prioritizing our health, all of those things in our curriculum. So for our cohorts, we are integrating those type of education opportunities as well.
That's great. Yeah, I think taking care of our health is so important and something that is so easy to overlook. Umi, do you want to talk a little bit about the amazing work you're doing right now?
Absolutely. I just want to say also just lots of kudos to the Unite Oregon and all the organizations doing statewide immigrant rights work in Oregon. Currently at Familia, we have a national focus, and we've had a pending campaign, a campaign that's been ongoing with a pending lawsuit towards Homeland Security and ICE detention facilities for the murder of trans individuals in detention. Namely Roxana Hernandez, Central American trans woman who passed away on May 25th of 2018. And also last year, Joanna Medina, who passed away in June 1st, the beginning of Pride Month. And that has all moved towards a class action lawsuit led by the Transgender Law Center, our coalition partners through the Trans Migrant Freedom Coalition. And this is a coalition spearheaded by some major national organizations that are trans queer led, primarily Black LGBT plus Migrant Project, along with us at Familia and TLC. And the lawsuit is a class action to release all trans individuals from detention center at the moment, due to the fact that Homeland Security that created a memo in 2015 on how to cage trans people is held accountable for the fact that they haven't met that memo, and in fact, they can't keep vulnerable communities, including trans people, in safety out of harm's way, particularly right now during COVID times. And so we're hopeful that, in the coming weeks, we're seeing some good headway along with that, primarily spearheaded by the Transgender Law Center I mentioned, and also the direct defense network. And essentially, we've been supporting our community-based migrant folks, people that have been, who have now gone through post-detention. We have a Healing Justice program, a retreat that was able to meet right before a lot of the stay-at-home mandates and CDC regulations. And essentially, this is a weekend where we ground ourselves on healing out of all the pain and really all the state-funded violence inflicted on our migrant, trans, and queer community. And so we've been supporting a lot of that, kind of shifting, like you all are programming virtually, so we can stay connected with trans and queer migrants across the country.
Yeah, thanks for that, Umi. Can I ask a little bit more? I know that beyond the 2 women who died in custody at ICE, there's been a lot of horrifying statistics about how trans people and trans women in particular are treated in ICE custody, including just huge levels of violence and sexual violence. And I think, you know, we all agree, right, that there is no way that it's safe for trans women to be in ICE custody, nor anyone really. But can you just talk a little bit about what it's like for especially trans women who are being held in custody?
Most recently, absolutely, most recently from community who's been in detention centers, we've heard of just the lack of sanitation or the lack of space that people have to remain distance. For people transitioning who are normally neglected, most people in detention, all people in detention, normally neglected any kind of medical attention or care, things that are actually mandated, and things that, you know, taxpayer money go towards being, making sure that detention centers keep people healthy. So and I guess, yeah, in general, imagining, thinking of transphobia and the way that transphobia manifests and operates, and people experience it in a detention center, it's magnified. Harassment from people that are also detained, harassment for sure, without a doubt, from guards, and even through research and findings through Freedom of Information Acts and gathering information, you know, there's even specifically, deliberate footage missing that would have shown ways that Roxana was treated when she was being transferred finally to get medical care, even though, ICE only had custody of her for about 3 weeks, and for a span of 2.5 weeks, the folks that migrated up to the States with her were also in detention, and had organized a hunger strike in there to bring attention on the fact that she had requested medical care immediately, and when she was being processed to be taken into detention, she was under health conditions that shouldn't have allowed her to be processed for detention. And so it just goes to show how on the daily operations of things, CBP, which is the Correctional Border Patrol, or detention facilities that people get transferred to when they're seeking asylum. Mind you, these are individuals that are, have a human right to seek asylum, but obviously there's a lot of things going on federally, including, as you mentioned, Nancy, a complete stop and pausing of immigration. And so that definitely has a major ripple effect in detention even. And for detention specifically, earlier this year, there was, through a lot of the advocacy by multiple organizations around the detention center in Cibola outside of Albuquerque, which is a trans detention pod. Cibola was under investigation due to the murders of these women that we've been mentioning, and they've decided to, while they're being investigated, they just transferred trans communities all over the country. And so the transfers have been, we've been connecting a lot with our colleagues in Seattle, with Monserrat and their LGBT statewide coalition, who had really supported earlier in January there was transfers from Cibola that happened earlier this year in January. And finally, during COVID times and during lockdown times, Monserrat and a lot of the coalition partners were able to release the folks that were transferred there, and our partners elsewhere around the country where the transfers have happened. But essentially the goal right now is to make a case for ending trans detention as a tactic to speak about the abolition of ICE overall, because they're not really, especially now during COVID times, it really goes to show how much of a danger and a health risk they are to everyone detained and outside of detention.
Thank you for that update. It's so important. And can we just take a breath and just think about what it means? Halting immigration. Like, I don't remember this in my lifetime. And I feel like, for as effed up as we are as a country, for so many people, right? This is the beacon, this is the place to seek asylum, and especially for LGBTQ people who are trying to get here to be safe and to be themselves. It's really heartbreaking that this is what's happening in this moment, and just for everybody, right? Like, I know with my own family, once my parents became citizens and they could sponsor their siblings, it took 12 years, 14 years. People wait lifetimes to get here and then to be told no. So whether they're waiting for their spouse or their brother or their aunt or their mom, I mean, it's so hard that this is the reality that we're in. And then once you're here, folks aren't necessarily being treated very well. And I feel like one of the things that I think about is the way DACA has been used as sort of political pinball, right? Where it keeps going back and forth about what's happening with DACA recipients. And Fatima, I know when you came and spoke at the Basic Rights Oregon Statewide Action Summit, you really shared your story and talked about being a dreamer. And I feel like, the movement to get DACA was such a beautiful movement, even if DACA wasn't exactly what the dreamers wanted. It was still a huge victory for organizing, and really came from the grassroots. And I just feel like, with the Supreme Court preparing to rule on DACA this spring, can you just talk a little bit about the work you're doing and what role dreamers have in this moment?
Most definitely. I guess, Umi, first, thank you for sharing. That was really important message. I appreciate your voice. And I also just want to kind of share a story, because that's the only way I know how to speak. Like I mentioned at the beginning, my dad is really sick, and I've been thinking a lot about my story and my siblings. And my sister, she identifies as queer, and so my brother is gay, and immigration it's all intertwined, and being home and spending time with them. But let me just kind of, with my dad's situation, and he's been really sick, and trying to go to these appointments, because my relationship with my father is very broken. He's hurt my family a lot, and both of my parents have never been accepting of my both of my siblings' identity as being queer. And so that's always been something so hard for me, because that's my brother, that's my sister, and hearing my parents talk about that is so hurtful. And I was at the doctor's appointment, and my dad, he's being treated by he was a nurse, and he was transgender, and he had his nails painted, and it was just so beautiful. And he was, the nurse was taking care of my dad, and checking the blood pressure. And then my dad's shaking his head, and he's like, "If you knew I was allergic to gays." And the homophobia, just my whole body, I was so hurt, I was, my heart, everything, my whole body. And that was the real pain I was feeling. And with DACA and everything, I tell my mom, and I tell my sister, I hate having to wake up at 6:45 a.m. to see if there's a decision on DACA. Like, why can't they just say they're going to make a decision on DACA? Why do they have to keep making us wait with this anxiety? And it's like you said, yes, a political bargaining chip. Like, that's what we've been. We've been, used. We've been tokenized. We've used, and I've been thinking a lot. And I was speaking at this next up panel, very similar to this, and I was talking to young youth, and they were asking questions about like, have you been tokenized? Have you, in organizing? And I was like, yes, I have, because I've had to share my story. I've had to like yell it at them. Like when we were in DC, and I was sleeping on the gym floor with one blanket, and I was like, I'm yelling at you. I'm in your office. Like, are you not going to do anything? Like, we're in here. And like, I was just like looking at all the people around me, and it was like the most beautiful moment, because I knew I wasn't alone. I knew there was like a community out there, and so right now it's been hell. It's been really hard, and I hate that I have to keep using my story, because it's not fair, because I've been a poster child, and I'm happy that I'm a poster child, because it's made me who I am. And so that's sort of been like my healing process. Like, I legit turned into a little caterpillar, and then I had to like come back to life again, because that's the only way I knew how to do it. And so thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my story at Basic Rights, because that was the moment that was pivotal, that changed my life forever. And yeah, like, I think I said enough.
Thank you, Fatima. Yeah, I feel like, what you bring up is so many parts of it, right? It's all complicated. Like, people feel like they're screaming into the wind, right? Like, where's your voice going, right? And we live in a time, right, that feels like everything is against us, and we're still trying to fight for the things we believe in, and including fighting for our family members who don't accept us, or our siblings for who we are, right? And it's not like any community is like perfect, or any family, right? It's all complicated. And thank you. Thank you for being willing to share. And I think that one thing that I've been thinking about a lot as the pressure on our communities is just like, the Department of Justice reported this huge spike in hate crimes in Oregon, and this affects our communities hugely, and it's largely people of color and the LGBTQ community, especially the trans community, who's seen this spike. Nuhameen, have you seen this affect the Unite Oregon folks and communities you work with?
Yeah, we've been documenting and recording instances of hate crime in our communities, and it has skyrocketed, especially for the Asian community, South Asian community, especially right after the pandemic hit, businesses that are hurting, people that are being targeted, kids that are being bullied in school and by their classmates, and it's everywhere. And yeah, we've been documenting, and we've been taking calls about hate crimes happening in our community. And just to honor to like what Umi shared, and also what Fatima shared about your experience, the immigrant community is so it's so diverse. We have people from all over the world, and then we also have belief systems that are hurtful and harmful, as well as belief systems that are healing and wonderful. We have all of those things, and they dwell within each family. So it becomes this this really interesting dynamic. So I when I say I feel your pain 100%. I know exactly what you're talking about. And, you know, I have the most, I would say, I shouldn't say the most, but I'm from the Ethiopian community, and we're very much hateful against queer people. It's something that is in our community, and it's like embedded in religion and tradition and all of these things. And I spend a lot of time on this in social media account that is trying to debunk this myth that foreigners, quote unquote, bringing it into our country, you know, that's the belief, and just erasing indigenous gender, non-binary genders, and just this freedom that our indigenous our ancestors have given us about sexuality and gender, and all of these things just become swept under the rug, and it becomes this like white man brought it type of thing. And the struggle and the resistance is so much alive in each of our communities, no matter where we come from. I see it. I see it in the Ethiopian community. There is like a very vibrant queer community that's fighting, and there's it just from everywhere, and you see it. And I think it's so important for us to honor that work also. And then I also cannot stress enough the healing that needs to happen for ourselves, in order for us to see our parents for who they are and love them nonetheless, but also protect ourselves from harmful relationships, even when they're in our own family. So it just becomes this really important balance for us to spend a lot of time healing, and a lot of time healing one another, and a lot of time loving one another. It's just such a gift and a very difficult thing. So I feel you, Fatima, and hang in there. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I'll just share, you know, I'm the head of an LGBT organization, right? And my dad thinks that, you know, white people invented being gay, right? And I'm just like, that's funny. You're from a country that's had a third gender marker since 2013, right? Like, there's a huge history in South Asia. My family's from Bangladesh, of, you know, recognizing a third gender. Yet, you know, he thinks the whole thing just, oh, that's an American thing, right? And yeah, I think our, you know, it's our communities are complicated. And one thing that's been moving for me as a queer person who's, you know, raised in a really strict religious household is the Muslim Educational Trust here in Oregon. You know, they were asked to sign on to anti-LGBT ballot measures, and they surprised the sort of right-wing Christian people by saying, no, what you're asking for is against human rights. And it's really comforting to me that our local Muslim community really stood up for the LGBTQ community. So I really appreciate that. And Umi, it looks like you wanted to jump in.
This is, I also want to express gratitude for the vulnerability, for the honesty. I mean, Fatima, you're just reminding me that vulnerability is power, that our story is power. And I think you're also just bringing me into very real the ways that the rest of us are sharing just how complex families and loved ones and family structures are. I think I've come out to my parents about, you know, I think I came out to them as a teenager as, you know, I had to come out as an ally, and then I came out as bi, and I've done all these coming outs to, like, you know, a few years ago, I came out to them as trans, and that was also like one of those like, whoa, we've loved you as an ally, as gay, as bi, as all these things. But now you're really like, you know, I think maybe some of their words were like, now you're exaggerating, you know, now you've gone over what we're ready for. And there's something really interesting that we've actually navigated the last few months that really have, I feel like, expedited this very quickly, come around embracing, and I think even specifically connecting with Tepehuan, with our Tepehuan culture, my dad's side of the family, and just many of those conversations, like you all have been highlighting, and I think your vulnerability and your honesty as power, Fatima, and all of us, I think just remind me of how I want to continue connecting like this with community and the work that we do. And then, you know, these spaces and times that we share with each other bring about, you know, they go to the root. They go to the root of where more pain lies. And I know we were also talking about DACA, and DACA specifically being something that, you know, out of movement building of feminists, of queer and trans folks, of youth, pushing for something very, very progressive and radical when immigration conversations weren't heard at the congressional level. You know, people didn't want to have immigration conversations in the early 2000s. And so the fact that there's been a 2-decade trajectory of DACA, what's been used, you know, I think there's a lot to say about where even those movements have come from, as Nancy was saying, and the fact that I think for us at Familia, we've also been we're focusing also on putting a trans and queer migrant town hall together to be in space with a lot of folks that initially were moving and pushing for what became DACA, and just getting that more of the conversation about the movement and where that's spearheaded from and things like that. And sorry, Nancy, I don't know if I think you may have asked me a question specifically, but I may have forgotten. But I wanted to say that, Fatima, that I really do appreciate that in all of us, the vulnerability that we also share with each other. It's power, for sure.
Thank you, Umi. I appreciate your words of encouragement. And I wanted, because the question was like, can you tell us about your work? So yes, let me tell you about my work. So we have the Home is Here Oregon Coalition, that is composed of, you know, groups such as Causa. It's being also led by the Oregon DACA Coalition, Adelante Mujeres, the TPS Alliance, Viva Inclusive Migrant Network, One Oregon, Oregon Ready, and, you know, several organizations that I don't have time to mention right now. But we are, you know, working. We have several work groups right now in place that are moving different areas of the campaign, because we recognize that this is gonna take a plan, and I'm working really closely with Cristina, my supervisor at Causa, to develop this plan, right? And I'm getting help from all of the staff at Causa to really create a plan, because we recognize the uncertainty, but we're like you know, like everyone just mentioned, my story is power. And every day that I go to my organizing meetings and I create my agenda, like that's what I'm always like reminded of. And I'm just like very, very thankful for the job that I get to do, because I had to navigate how to go to college, and I have a work group right now. It's called, we're power mapping. We're dealing how we can talk to school districts on how to prepare for a DACA decision. You know, since teachers are every day in the classroom with students, how do they prepare? How do we protect the most vulnerable communities? And so it's been, and it's also mental health. We also have a work group on mental health, and we have a flyer, and we have the Oregon Immigration resource page, and that has a whole bunch of information on how to fund your renewal. If you're struggling, if you need, you know, if you need to fill out that application, just know that there's still, you know, lawyers are still available to help, and applications are being accepted. And if you want to download your own forms, you can do it at your own house. And there's, you know, there's on May 22nd, there's also going to be, we're working with SOAR Immigration. I can't, SOAR, just know it's SOAR. And in May 22nd, and that's going to be happening in the morning, Friday. So you can tune in. We'll be, you know, circling a flyer, Spanish and English, hopefully soon. And we'll get that sent out to the community, because we need to be prepared.
Great, thank you, Fatima. So I know that some of the work you're doing and Unite Oregon and Familia is really with people who are sort of on the front lines, right, of COVID-19. And, you know, like Fatima, you were mentioning, you know, the trans nurse. And I think that we all know in communities of color, right, that people are, you know, there's all this attention to doctors and nurses, many of whom come from immigrant backgrounds, but also the people who are cleaning those COVID rooms, and the people who are doing that care in nursing homes. And it feels like our communities are being disproportionately affected by COVID-19, particularly in Oregon. The Latino community has more cases per capita. And let's talk a little bit about what we see happening and how folks are trying to support each other, and just some of the what it's like for folks on the front lines. Nuhamin, do you want to jump in? It feels like I see some serious.
Yeah, I was nodding when you said that about the Latinx community in Oregon. My closest friend from childhood is a critical care provider in Washington. And I was speaking with her the other day, and she was telling me Idaho, Oregon, Washington, the largest population that is affected by COVID. People who are getting sick and people who are dying from COVID disproportionately are Latinx community members, a lot of whom are denied any kind of safety net right now. No stimulus check, no unemployment, really, and no health insurance. And the thing that really just kind of grates at me is that even if a person is sick and they survive, they would not have health insurance to do rehab afterward for their lungs that have been damaged by this virus. And there's just so much, and most of whom are the only member of the family that's providing for the family here and elsewhere, not just the people here, but people back home. We're failing our community members on policy level, just on epic proportions, and it's really heartbreaking. And I just kept saying to myself, what are we doing? We need to do something. Like this, especially the healthcare disparity. The reason why we see this disparity already is because of institutionalized racism. We've ensured that this outcome will happen by the way we were writing our laws and how we chose whom to exclude from our institutions to get healthcare, to get education, to all of these things. So now that we're here, what kind of future are we building? What are we doing? We see farming communities having widespread testing now because they know who is getting affected by this. And it's not really for the people that are being affected, it's for the other people that do not want this virus to spread. Can we start rethinking the way we make our policies? Can we think of the most vulnerable community members and make our policies based on the needs of the most vulnerable among us? Can we reframe how we look at healthcare? Can we see it as a public good? Can we see it as something that we all need, not just some of us that can afford it? So I think that there are a lot of community members working toward this. I do not want to discount the strides we've made and the fights we fought in the past. I think this is such a pivotal moment for us to see what kind of future we want to build together.
Yeah, I think what you're saying is so right on. I just keep thinking about, we can't go back to the way things were. We can't go back to what was normal. We need to build a new normal that fills in the gaps on what inequality and racism and everything else has wrought, right? And it's just like everything is laid bare right now around all the lacks, right? Like it's not like people working in meat packing factories were having great jobs before, right? But now they're getting COVID and dying, and it's like people wouldn't give a shit about sorry everyone, about what was happening to them, except it affects what's available in the grocery store. And like people are so outraged they can only get one pack of effing chicken. It's like what? Like, it's just so huge. And I really feel like we need to be putting out there like what our vision is for what we want to build. And Speaking of vision, we actually have our first question in from a viewer. And it's for Umi, asking, it's a person who says, I'm a non-binary Oregonian, and I'd like to help amplify the work done to shut down ICE detention centers and release everyone. What's the best way to help lift up this work?
Awesome. Thank you so much for your question. There are a variety of things. Later this month, we will be engaging on a week of action for trans migrants. It will be beginning on the 2-year anniversary of Roxana Hernandez's murder, Monday, May 25th, and it will culminate Sunday, the 31st. And what we are declaring Trans Migrant Day. So we're making a declaration on the 31st of May. There's a series of actions that we'll be having across the country that are being coordinated, including for the very first time, our coalition partners in Mexico City that are connected with migrants that come from Central America. And, the US-Mexico border is a border that, as we're acknowledging, border doors are access to global migrants. And so we are working outside of the confines of ideas of US immigration. And so there will be more ways that if you could follow us on Familia TQLM and our social media platforms, you'll be able to repost and essentially use that as an opportunity to also educate your local community. Because, the conversation that we're having right now about immigrants and undocumented people being left out. We're talking about millions of people that are actually investing back in taxes, as we know, hundreds of millions of, in income taxes, sales taxes, but are not getting anything back. And so essentially an immigrant community historically in this country has been that scapegoat, the community that's problematized. And so we want to bring attention to that. It's resulted in deaths in very incredibly inhumane ways through detention centers. And so the National Week of Action for Trans Migrants is coming up May 25th through the 31st. Please check that out. We'll also reach out to you all organizations, or if you have a group locally that would like to be part of the declaration of Trans Migrant Day, as well. Essentially, the grassroots movement to abolish ICE and around Roxana's case has really been led by trans migrant people themselves. And we're also using the week to acknowledge the leadership of people that have recently, they've been surviving in their home countries. They've migrated to the US, and now they're organizing here to uphold justice. And so those are direct ways that you can follow our work, and some of our coalition partners as well that will be a part of that. Thank you for asking.
Thanks, Umi. And so I feel like sort of in this conversation of what we want to build and what just immigration policy would look like, I just feel like we need to remind ourselves of how new ICE is, right? This wasn't a thing before, September 11th, 2001. And so it's, it's in the past 20 years that it was built, and it's just like, what I've always believed about policy, like if it can be built, it can be unbuilt. And so does anyone—
We always say at Familia that ICE was built in our generation, and it could be dismantled in our generation. It will be. And so, yeah, totally agree with that. I think it's been like some odd 14, 15 years or something like that.
Yeah.
That so.
Yeah, it's not, I don't think abolishing ICE is a pipe dream, right? It's like, they made it out of nothing, right? Just like the TSA, like all these other things that now just feel like part of the fabric of the United States, but it's all fairly recent, and it can be undone. So we just got another question for the panel, and be ready with your websites, because someone's asking, are there organizations redistributing money from folks who got the $1,200 stimulus funds or CARES funds and who want to donate it to someone who might not qualify to get that $1,200 check. Nuhameen, you nodded first.
Yeah, we actually thought about that when we launched the Immigrant Refugee Support Fund, and we did share a story and asked folks to redistribute that money if you don't need it, and we have that on our website. It's uniteoregon.org. It's on a banner. When you go on the website, you can click on it. It says COVID Immigrant Refugee Support Fund. So yeah, and that is undoing an injustice. You see an injustice being done where families that need it, individuals that need it, that pay into the system without ever being able to gain from the safety net that they were being that they've been paying into. So it's our way of giving folks opportunity to right what's been wrong, and we encourage people to definitely redistribute their stimulus check.
Thank you. Fatima, is there a similar fund, or can people contribute to the Oregon Worker Relief Fund?
Yes, you can visit the Oregon Workers Relief Fund. It's up and ready to go now. So there's great visuals, there's great stories. You can log in. I guess I can share a little bit more of what it is. So it's a disaster relief fund, which is why we CAUSA can be the fiscal agent. And so it's something that it's gonna. Do you want me to share how much like the aid and stuff, or?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so the aid will be $420 or $430 a week for up to 4 weeks, up to, approximately 1,720 for now.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, a $1,200 stimulus check would make a huge difference in growing that fund if people are able to donate.
That is incredible, and so glad that there's a lot of great efforts here in the state of Oregon. Also, if folks are seeking some, there's also a national transmigrant one through our partners in New York, and you can find those links on our social media, Familia TQLM, whether it be Instagram or our site or Facebook. And there's also Monserrat isn't on the call, but Monserrat's statewide LGBT coalition also has one through WASIN, the Washington Immigrant Solidarity Network, that you could also look through one for Pacific Northwest or national trans queer migrant fund supports as well.
Thank you. Thank you all for sharing those. And so sort of just to go back to that conversation, it feels like around what we want to build and, what we've been fighting for these past over 20 years. It feels like, I remember in 2003, being in a huge stadium in New York after a nationwide immigrant rights caravan where people went to DC and New York. There was this huge concert. It was going to happen. Immigration reform was just like so close. Wyclef Jean played. It was amazing. We were all like, tens of thousands of us there and ready for the change and fighting for the change. And then a few years later, it felt like we were close again. I remember seeing people's work plans on how they were like, even local groups in Oregon, like PECU, and like they had this beautiful work plan of how they were going to help all these people become citizens. It was, we've been so close so many times. And just in my memory of doing work in Oregon over 20 years, it's been a while. But, and in Oregon and in DC, and I feel like it doesn't feel close anymore. It doesn't feel close in this moment. It feels like we're moving backwards, right? And I think a lot of the backlash against people who are Chinese or perceived as being Chinese has like me remembering a lot of feelings that I felt after September 11th of being targeted and being scared to be out in public and especially my family members who wore hijab being very scared to be out. And, you know, of course, in 2016, our country took a turn for the worse. But I feel like our communities are so resilient, and that the majority of Americans are with us on building more just policies. Um, I don't know what my question is. I guess it's just sort of just thinking about like how we're, you know, I feel like we've been in the fight for so long, right? That I think that people of color, you know, all the immigrant communities have been fighting, and then also our Black and Indigenous communities have been fighting for so long against this hatred of other, right? That people think they have. And, but I don't know, I guess I just want to sort of get a sense for folks who are working directly with people who are, you know, not yet citizens in the US, how people are feeling, you know, because I feel like sometimes I get pretty policy wonky and I get bogged down, and then I meet people and they're just like, no, it's going to happen, right? And I just am always amazed at how hopeful people remain. Um, does anyone have any stories they want to share about what's happening in communities or um, that you've seen?
I think the mutual aid, I think is the ways mutual support, communicating with like local, um, uh, just the kind of supports that were offered with local communities coming together to just respond as things were unfolding. I think the fact that there's constantly many realities that we're living through aside from the very real pain is always inspiring. I think I'm always thinking about and wondering how all these trans folks that I get to work with daily have migrated halfway across the world, gone through really, really awful situations, arrived here and are still organizing, and they still share stories of joy and resiliency. And but it's tough. It is very tough. And I don't know, I think some of our members have also reminded us that we don't want to have to be resilient, and that's also been very real. I think um, the very in the midst of the very complicated and murky, it's been amazing to also see all the ways that people have been present to support one another and still live our true selves.
Great. Thank you, Umi. Nuhamin?
I would like to add that the one thing that is very different about this administration and what's going on right now is misinformation. The amount of misinformation about immigration, especially, is staggering. And we don't know what's real and what's not anymore coming out of elected officials. We don't know if this is a rumor or if this is an actual policy that's being implemented. And sometimes the rumors themselves become well known in the immigrant community that they're believed to be true. And they keep folks from accessing resources. Like this is an example is the public charge rule that was introduced, and it took a while for it to get, to pass. And when it did, it already done so much damage to the community where folks were giving up their housing assistance, they were giving up their food assistance, they were giving up all kinds of assistance. And the lie itself, the cruelty is in the lie to make people voluntarily give up these life-saving resources and essential resources for themselves and for their families. And it becomes just widespread. So I think what we really need, honestly, I think we need updated videos, updated virtual meetings from lawyers, from policy experts who are debunking these things as they're happening. We need a really strong media presence where we're fighting the fight on social media because that's where a lot of these things happen. And we have to disseminate this information into our communities so people are not living in fear constantly that, one, they can't adjust their status if they have WIC or like things like that, where it's not true. You can do that, but because of the misinformation out there, it becomes known to be real, and it keeps people from accessing those things that they have a right to access. And there's a lot of shortage of free legal immigration counsel. So that's another thing. And, you know, it's really difficult to get our community members get the kind of legal advice they need so they can adjust their status. Assistance, we need money. Like, people need money in order to get there. You know how much it costs to just, to get your citizenship right now? It's like close to $2,000. It's like, how are people going to afford that? It's becoming increasingly unaffordable, and they keep raising it. So we need to invest a lot of resources and money and information, our time, all of that, to debunk these lies that are being told, and also to help folks really get the security they need if they want to and they're able to adjust their status to do that.
That's great. Thank you. And I actually got a specific question for you, Nuhamin, about saying that the Unite Oregon resource list is great, and if you had any specific mental health or self-care resources you'd recommend.
Yeah, so with mental health resources, I was recently introduced to Kyo with the City of Portland, Civic Life. They're going to help us with our pilot cohort. They're going to help us do self-care and mental health. And if you look them up, they have information on their website, and I highly recommend getting this sort of help from healers that are Indigenous, healers that are from immigrant refugee background, healers that are queer, just really so that you can really, we want to pay them, right, for their work, and we want to keep them around because we really need them. And they have a resource of BIPOC mental health providers and all kinds of resources that we've been craving for so long in our communities. So I recommend that. You can also go to our website. I have been sending stuff for our people that update our website to add things. So mental health resources will be added there really soon. So keep checking there also.
Great, thank you. And then I need to encourage folks to sign up for our Queer Town Hall landing page. We've added a field for folks to include their YouTube commenter name. So if you've written a question, you can still be in the raffle. So thanks. And then our next question, I'm not sure if folks here can answer, but we can get you the answer because I know this organization very well. But the question is, I used to see day laborers all the time at the day labor site on MLK. Are there places where folks can go to hire folks for jobs, some outside work we could use help with? And I don't know if I know VOS, which is the day labor organization, has been doing great work in the community for many, many years. A lifetime ago in the 90s, we used to actually have a Migra watch where we would go stand on the corner and look out for vans, immigration vans, and who were constantly picking people up. And I was part of volunteering for that a long time ago. So that organization has been doing incredible work, at least since 1997 when I met them. And so if you go to VOS, the Day Labor Center, I'm sure they can give you some information about how you can still hire people. Does anyone else have different information?
Yeah, it's a great one for Portland. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, for Portland, and I think for folks in other parts of the state, there's probably a local organization you can connect with that has knowledge of folks, because folks are definitely still looking for work for sure and need work. And I think that on social media too, there's been a lot of people who are sharing if they're available. So I feel like we sort of touched on some parts of the Oregon Worker Relief Fund, um, and I think if folks have specific questions, you know, you can contact people at CAUSA. There's, but just know that the money is not available yet because they have to get the money to fund it. But can people send in their applications now, or do they have to wait, Fatima?
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. So the applicants who will be entered into the system at phase 1 are getting their funds from the money that we have raised through like individual donations, like the Oregon Food Bank. But just remember that we still haven't received all the funds from the state, so we cannot open it up to everyone until we have those funds available. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And so, and then, so again, people will be able to get up to $1,720, but you have to have started working before February 1, and you have to be at least 18 years old.
Yeah, that's correct.
Great.
But yeah.
Yeah. So people definitely need a lot of help with sort of basic needs right now, but a little bit about sort of community care and how we're seeing people sort of do that mutual aid and take care of each other in our communities. Umi, you started talking a little bit about some of the things you've seen happen. Do you want to expand on that?
I feel like what I was, yeah, you know, I think from the initial moments of you know, as things started to unfold, and seeing how people were just, you know, we have this, we acknowledge amongst the organizing team that if we want to get a hold of trans migrants, we just need a WhatsApp messenger group, and you know, and just bearing witness to these WhatsApp messenger groups. You know, there's a lot that gets informed with each other about the state that individuals are in and the immediate needs for housing. The needs are extreme, and hardly able to be met to the extent that they're, you know, like for example, there's a group of folks that just went through post detention, and they had been placed with a host so they could navigate their asylum seeking process outside of detention. But some folks were also placed with folks that are actually concerned about getting COVID. And so then they had to end their hosting and things like that. And so trying to find housing for folks that could experience the least amount or no transphobia is you know, a lot. And so I think the ways that people communicate with each other about like, hey, my lawyer that just helped me out made this comment, and let me ask him if he still knows about that one room that's available. Things like that have been, you know, it's really interesting how if we have a platform, if we bring a platform, and usually one that the community that we are organizing with and moving with are already using, um, our communities have been surviving a lot for a really long time. And so we're naturally organizers of surviving the situations that we navigate. And so those have been some of the ways. I think these other ways that eventually, as things unfolded some more drastic ways more recently in the past month, There's been the National Trans Migrant Mutual Aid Fund, and a lot of really amazing things that creatives have been doing. I think here locally in Portland, we had House of Ada do a fundraiser for trans housing, and supporting a few other direct service organizations and things like that. And they're doing, the things that they're used to making and creating, out of the things that they as queer and trans people navigate through in this world. And it's been beautiful to see the daily creative ways that we naturally engage in to survive, that we've also engaged in those to support in our own time of need those that are close to us that are also in need. And so yeah, I mentioned some of those mutual aids again, and I think it's bringing more perspective to some of the things that we want to do. For example, with this class action lawsuit, and crossing fingers, great things come out of that. There's roughly 100 and some trans people in detention centers right now. There will be such a need for housing, and so one of the organizing coordinating needs will be to identify regions and areas where people are willing to take workshops and know what it takes to be a host of someone who's a trans person who's seeking asylum here in the US. Well, and people that are already actually now navigating their processes. Things change very often. But I think there's organizing needs that we're being informed through these platforms that trans migrants have already been using to communicate with each other about what their needs are. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Umi. Do other folks have examples you've seen of mutual aid, or just how people have been supporting each other in community at this time? It's okay if you don't.
Can you ask the question again?
Just about how you've seen community care for each other in this time, like whether it's through mutual aid or just like people organizing in neighborhoods, or just
Yeah, I can think of a
communities.
few examples just right on top of my head. Like my mom's church community has been just giving out food boxes, and it's been super helpful at the house, like not having to like worry about groceries. Like there's like a box of cereal and oatmeal, like just ready to go, rice and beans for the house. So that's been just like a huge help. And she's applied for food stamps again right now, and she went to the office and got the forms, but they were not very helpful. Like they were just like, she was in line and like they didn't even like bother calling her up to the window. And it's like, what are you doing? Like, come on. And so I tried to call the unemployment office yesterday, and I just kept getting like a buzzing noise. Like it was like beep, beep. And I was like, what is going on? And like, because some lady came to the house and she was like, hey, like I've been trying to file for unemployment. And they're not taking my application right now. I have to pay rent. Like, what do I do? And I was like, well, you need to keep filing for unemployment. Like you need to fill out the application. And I had never like gone on the website, and I go and like, it's also in Spanish, so that's good. So I, kind of just, just keep applying, because the systems they weren't built for it. Everything is backed up. So I think it's a lot of patience from everyone right now.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that our state agencies are trying really hard, but very overwhelmed by the incredible amount of need in our communities, and how many people are applying for the same benefits at the same time. And know that they've just hired a bunch of people. Nuhameen, did you want to jump in?
Yeah, I was going to say that the mutual aid PDX folks were so gracious when we were working on our fundraiser. They helped us, just giving us advice on how to do it, and because they have gone through the, building their website and all of that on their own. So I have been looking at their model and just really thinking like the similarities between that and like being an immigrant myself, and knowing like how we organize, as Umi was saying earlier. It's just so similar, and that I think that is such a beautiful way for us to move forward, to rely on one another way more than we have been, and to really go back to our indigenous roots of community over individuality, like all of these things that are really important, that we need one another to survive. So Mutual Aid PDX, their website, if you check it out, it's just Mutual Aid PDX, and you're able to put in a request for food box or anything that you need if you're immunocompromised, or if you're elderly, or you can't leave your home because of COVID, and you let them know exactly what your needs are and what your barriers are, and they will match with people that are able to meet that need. And they also work with the Oregon Food Bank, and just they're really wonderful. So I give them a shout out. They're really great.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. And do you want to mention the Radical Meditation group for everyone?
Oh, yes. So I saw there was a question about that. I was looking it up to provide it. And so it's the one I mentioned earlier, Radical Meditation. And they have a list of BIPOC healers and mental health experts, I would say, I guess, or folks that really that can teach us tools how to deal with the stressors that we're experiencing, especially right now. I think it's a really difficult time for folks who have experienced trauma in the past. There are a lot of stressors right now in our environment, so we're really taking care of ourselves and really listening to our body and our mind, our spirit. It's really important. So yeah, look them up, and you'll find a lot of resources on that website.
So that's a Facebook group too, right? The Radical Meditation for BIPOC?
Yes, there's a Facebook group as well. I am hardly ever on Facebook, so that's my own mental health thing that I stay away from Facebook. So, but yeah, if y'all are on Facebook, it's on there. It's also on Instagram.
That's great. Thanks.
So if you're in the Portland metro area, check out also Sacred Lattice, queer women of color, leading a lot of like tea making, herbal tinctures, all that good energy work as well. Sacred Lattice.
Sacred Lattice?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Sacred Lattice.
Okay.
That's great. Sacred Lattice. It sounds lovely. So we only have about 10 minutes left, and I guess I'm just really, I don't know, I just keep thinking about the resilience of our communities and how resourceful we really are. And like, I don't know, I always think about people like my uncle who just passed. So we sponsored him, or my dad sponsored him, and then he had to show a certain amount of money in his bank account to sponsor his wife and daughter. And he saved $40,000 working at Wendy's. It's just like, how did you do this? Working his butt off, working at Wendy's, saving every single penny. And I just feel like, over and over, I'm just really amazed at just how we make something from nothing always, and how people of color in our community have been doing this forever, and in immigrant communities in particular. And so I think that we've been doing it for so long, and we deserve better right now. And it's part of the reimagining, right, that we want to do. So maybe what we can end on is just like maybe sharing something about what your vision would be for a just future for immigrant communities in the United States, and just like spend a moment and just like really just think about what you want to see and what justice looks like for our communities, because it feels like we've been fighting over crumbs for too long and fighting uphill. So maybe just like, let's hopefully think about what our vision is. Even close your eyes for a second and just really put yourself in a place of what just migration looks like, what it feels like. And if we're ready, Umi, I'm going to pick on you because I know you the best. Umi is a former board member of Basic Rights Oregon.
One of
And
my
we've done it
organizing
for a long time.
rights. Yes, totally. I think I'm thinking of some a few things. I love what our partners at Black LGBT plus Migrant Project, BLMP, always say, that they dream of a world where trans and queer migrants and all migrants can choose to migrate on their own and are able to, also return home and migrate as they wish. That we wish to see a world where our local policies and business practices don't continue to go elsewhere everywhere in the world and depleting economies and creating, messy political social dynamics that force people to migrate and displace people, that we envision immigration and migration movements in the states connecting in those ways abroad and outside of the states, so we can build that kind of a world so that migrants can really move, so that all people can have mobility that isn't restricted. Envision no detention centers, no ICE. Dominic shared that, ICE created through Homeland Security happened in the first term of George W. Bush. And so, I envision that institution that began so recently in our generation, not even just 2 decades ago, that that we envision this system abolished and reinvested back into community in one way or another to help with the harm that it's caused.
Thank you, Umi. Fatima?
Yeah, I want to echo everything, Umi, that you've said. Yes, like an America that respects disability, that accepts queer people, that embraces our diversity as immigrants. I think that's the most important thing. And especially now, like, right, I always how sad that it took a fucking world pandemic to value essential workers. But I always go back to that and the resiliency that our community builds, because we're a community of dreamers, of creators, and I've heard this from some of my fellow dreamers too, and that's right, that's who we are. Like, we're innovators, we build from nothing, and we know that DACA is not a solution. We recognize it was only a bandage, and we're asking for fair radical change, right? We were asking for pathway to citizenship for the 11 million undocumented people. That's what we need. Like, I'm tired of asking for a little piece of the pie. We need all of it. And yeah, DACA was never enough, and we were here before DACA, and we will stay, and we'll stay here because this is our home.
Yeah. Thank you, Fatima. Nuhamin?
I agree with all the things Fatima said and Umi. And I always think, of freedom and what it means for us as immigrants, and also freedom as it means for just on so many levels, on so many identities. I think that this idea of hoarding wealth and hoarding resources like a dragon that's sitting on top of all its treasures, and that I see our society as that more often, and I just really want to see this nation honoring this land as occupied land. This land is Native American land, and that in itself, like the land to be freed from white supremacy, the land to be freed from capitalism, the land to be freed from settler colonialism and all of these things, like that freedom for the land itself and freedom for the people. And then for us, like as migrants, you know, people who've come here because we or our parents wanted the best for us. You know, that's usually what I've been told, you know, my whole life. And you know, what's best for me is home. And I think like for us to have the freedom to have home, wherever that may be. It may be here, it may be where we were born, it may be some other place that we've never been to, but like for us to have that freedom to be there and to be there as our whole selves, just to really exist without these, you know, these things we've made up so that we can hoard wealth and power.
Thank you for that, Nuhamin. And I just wanted to share a comment from a viewer. These panelists are amazing. They're giving me life and helping me feel more grounded right now. Thank you for all your help and your kindness. And I just really want to echo those thoughts. I feel like thank you all so much. We were down 2 people, but the 3 of you are incredible, and I really appreciate you and the work you do in the world and who you are as people. And I just really am excited to build toward this vision together of what we want to build and what we're fighting for, and for people to know that immigrant rights are LGBTQ rights too, and that the LGBTQ community includes all of us. Yeah, and so I just am really excited about having spent this. It looked like 90 minutes, but it was really 2 hours with you all, and I'm so appreciative, and just really thank you, and I hope everyone has a fantastic night.